Well, this was fun. This was the first time I ever interviewed a NIM. And so this is a friend of mine who's pseudonymous online. And what's interesting about it is he chose to not represent his identity online, not necessarily because he has an urgent need around pseudonymity, but that he wants to get good at the tools and push the boundary on understanding and clarification and fixes in the tools so that people who do have a more desperate need can have great tools when it's time. So he's kind of doing it out of service to the world rather than because of his own individual need today. So one of the things, though, unfortunately, we had the beginning of the interview cut off because he was using a special browser that I think he had a special setting on that didn't allow the video to be recorded properly and published. And so it took until about midway through the interview that we realized that was happening. We flipped out his other setting and flipped to a new setting, and then we pick up there. And that's where we pick up the interview. So I tried to summarize a little bit of it at the beginning here. But just know that when you're playing with these new privacy tools, things can be a little dicey and more challenging than you might expect. So all of that is to say, we got together to talk about Nostr and kind of more broadly talked about freedom technologies. And we talked about his purpose in being a pseudonym online. We talk about how to get started playing with the dark web just to try to understand more about the tools that might be available for that, and kind of what inspires his passion around these types of technologies. And we talk about kind of Nostr and its kind of privacy orientation versus not, and the politics of privacy technologies. We talk about how tools that were built in a Lightning environment, like Stacker News and Geyser, how they might consider adapting or how they consider about the service that they might present to the world, given that now Nostr is a thing and it's been discovered, invented, and it might be useful to reconsider what parts of those services will be the same and which parts of those might evolve. And then we talk more broadly about squinting to see the future and what kinds of experiences could be built and how you could have maybe an interoperable messaging or publishing or consumption interface in the future for all of the different modalities that you might want to consume from. And at the end, we talked about designing for emergence, which is an area that Nout is very passionate about, but we haven't had a chance to go deep in it yet. So I left a link in the description, and we'll most certainly do a follow-up discussion where we'll make a video pod and talk more about designing for emergence, as well as a whole host of other topics that we've got planned. So I hope you enjoy this one. It's the first time I ever did an interview with a pseudonym online. So I hope you find it interesting, and I hope it inspires some thinking around Nostr.
All right, I'm back, hopefully.
Okay, so you're in a new browser?
Yeah.
Cool.
And this is fun of it, right? Like, none of this is easy.
Yeah.
But, no pain, no gain.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's good that, there's, that you're struggling through it as somebody who's informed, but not in desperate need of it, because there's somebody out there either today or in the future is going to be in desperate need of it. And they're not going to be able to struggle through it. There's going to be somebody who can't struggle through it the way you can because you're just so much more informed about the goals and what you're trying to accomplish. So I think it's a good service that you're providing to the world.
And it's good to kind of test it out sort of deeply. Like the one journey that is interesting, like if someone is interested in how do you get like a full best privacy setup, like how would you do that, right? Like there's many tutorials. How can you trust them? And so my suggestion is like go and follow the steps that the folks that their life depends on it actually use, right? And so this means like venturing, for example, into the space of darknet markets, right? Like trying to set up darknet markets, following the right tutorials, right? That is like a darknet Bible is a good initial tutorial that people would use. That is definitely eye-opening. Because a lot of the technologies that in this space we sometimes talk about, yeah, that's a privacy technology. It's so great. No, it's definitely not enough, right? If you are trying to defend yourself against actor of a government level, which in the darknet markets you are, then the current technologies we are using here and talking about here are definitely not enough, right? And so that's a really interesting to kind of venture into that and try setting it up. Like you don't need to buy anything or anything, right? Like just like try to get yourself in the darknet market and see if you can do it properly.
Can you give us a little bit of a beginner's guide to this? Because how, let's say I wanted to set this up. I've never done that before. If I were to set this up, I'm, generally familiar with a lot of the technologies and, different browsers and VPNs and Tor and stuff like that. But like, I don't know like the recipe or the sequence of things to explore. So I wonder if you could just give a little bit of a rundown on what that might look like.
So often like the first step would be the setup of your machine, right? Like you definitely do not want to use any of your current hardware that has already been connected and already fingerprinted, right? So this would mean like, the basic tutorial is essentially you get yourself an operating system on a little USB flash card. You probably Tails, the other one is Cubes. Those are like the two main ones. You would get Tails. Then you need a machine that's clear and you just bought it. And hopefully you bought it without really like referencing your face on a camera in the store or something like that. Right? So you have to be careful about the buying stuff. And you boot the system. You only, Tails
you mentioned
only...
face in a store is the only way that you would buy it is in person. You would not buy it online because it would have some tracking as it's delivered to your address.
Probably, right? And when you kind of get into the deeper guides, I don't want to like talk about too much because some of this may be incriminating, but some folks would have a special front and new addresses that they will use specifically for delivery of items, right? And then there is always between the sellers, you see the conversation whether the location is burned or not, whether, let's say feds already have it, location of it and such. So it's a little complicated, right? But it's good to see the tools. And what is really interesting to see, especially coming from like Tails and .NET markets, how much of that is using the most basic technology, right? We are like literally it's using PGP for signing, and you are using that to sign messages that you send to each other and for encryption. And that's the baseline, right? Another interesting aspect, definitely that the economy works on top of Bitcoin, but there is a space that is based on Monero. And a lot of that interaction is like, hey, how do you switch from Bitcoin into Monero, from Monero back? That's a reality of things, right? And that's why I'm saying, for folks, check the reality, right? Like check what the people that actually need this. If they don't have it, they get killed, right? That's the reality. People that need this, what do they use? And so that's a good learning experience, I would say.
Right. And when you talk about sort of the people who need it might get killed, it kind of makes me wonder, is there something like what got you turned on to this in the first place? Do you know people who've been through disastrous situation like that, or you're just as a technology thinker, you can see this potential future happening, or was there something in your childhood that sort of left a mark or kind of set the course of your life?
Yeah, as folks may be able to tell from my accent, I come from not US, and I come from post-communist country, and part of that is that like that's a native experience, right? Like the experience that someone is watching you, someone is telling on you, and when they do, and you are caught doing the thing, you and your family be in a prison, right? And we didn't have like a direct experience with prison like that, but there were definitely big inconveniences. Because of being against the regime, right? Being against.
And you knew people who had a more prison-like experience, or it was palpable. It felt common in life, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I should say that I have been there for only a couple of years of my life in that system, and baby. So I don't have like a direct experience, but what I do have is the stories and the experience from the people that were in that time, right? And so that's part of it, right? So I see it real, and the people are thinking about technologies like that, right? And it's kind of like a native, like like how do we do anonymous conversation? Obviously, and so people think about that. Which, by the way, like, for example, a story that I actually had from a friend, let's say his mother, somehow when it was like in the early 90s, and his mother found out that her house is on something like Google Maps, right? I think it was literally Google Maps, right? Which currently everything is mapped. You can see it everywhere, right? When she found out, she started crying. right? Like it goes that deeply, right? Like the fact that people are sort of traceable and visible from someone else, right? And from anyone online or from a government perspective. That is really worrying to people, right? Even though, that said, like technically speaking, there wasn't any risk coming from this, but you can see that the people think that way. So that's one part of the story. Second, I'm always interested in technology and I like to play with stuff, right? Like since I was a kid, I was always in some of those like chat groups and communities and things like people won't remember at all, but like DC++ had actually interesting chats. And it would always be fun to kind of hang out and have a community. We were anonymous back then, but it felt natural. Like you would never talk about your name. Why would you?
Right.
But it's interesting.
Do you ever consider different names outside of? Is it Nout? Is the way you pronounce it?
Yeah.
So outside of Nout, do you have other personas that you might use online, or is Nout your kind of core representation, or that maybe in other communities you represent as something else?
I use different. But it also, I would say, like changes over time. So I always have like in a 5 year span, I have like one main one, and then that gets somewhat burned. So I use a new thing.
I see.
So
constantly moving
new community,
around.
new technology, and we'll see.
Yeah. And what is it sort of, how does your enthusiasm for, let's say, Nostr play into this? Because Nostr is not particularly, it's not anonymous in any way, or it's not, it's freedom in certain ways, but it's not particularly privacy oriented today, right? So do you look at it and, just you can squint and see that future, or is it just a different type of freedom tech that maybe doesn't overlap with your privacy interests?
I would say Nostr, the architecture could be used in that like anonymous or pseudo-anonymous way, right? There is like as soon as you are anonymous to the point where you send something to the relay, no one knows about you, right? And if you do it in a way that you don't use any specific IP address, maybe you go through Tor, some of the relays support Tor, some of the paid ones, you're good sort of from privacy perspective. But okay, maybe like how the layer above it, how to think about that. So I see that there is information that is between maybe only yours or between you and your friend that you never want to get exposed, right? That is one type of information. And then we have the other type of information where you want everyone or as many people to be able to see it, and you want no one to be able to suppress it, right? And that's almost the decision that like you can make, right? The first one is the peer sort of communication, right? If you have a secret chat or communication with someone. Whereas when you have your social life and you have your public persona or online persona, you want everyone to be, and the opposite, right? You want no one to be able to like hide it and block you and suppress you and make sure that you are not exposed, right? And so both of those sides are part of the story. And that's where Nostr is, where it has the strength, is in this like, you post it once, it's there forever, Like if you kind of, maybe you need to do a little bit of work, maybe you have your personal relay, maybe you give a little extra money to a relay that stores the data for you, something like that. But in a sense, you do it once, anyone, it's the information is there. And we need a combination of both. And so that's how I see it. And that's where I see the value in Nostr, right? And I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Do you think that there's, I know one of the things that has been a common topic that comes up is around the way DMs work today on Nostr. So, DMs, obviously reveal a lot of the metadata because it is more in that latter category you mentioned around, things that you want everybody to be able to see. But obviously in a DM context, you really don't want everybody to be able to see it, but it's just convenient for DMs to be hooked up to the place where, it's otherwise the global water cooler. So do you sort of imagine that Nostr as a protocol would end up kind of also solving for those private use cases better? Or do you think that it just becomes a kind of an identity hub and then the actual private communication happens through some other mechanism that's either yet to be invented or some other technology tool we already have that executes it well?
I kind of think the latter, right? Like, or at least currently, in none of the Nostr technologies, I haven't seen anything that would be like solving this well, or even possible to solve it. So yeah, I think like the private communication, the anonymous or even private communication between you and your family or friends, I do not see that part of Nostr. Like Nostr currently, as you said, collects a lot of metadata across the whole path. The only encrypted thing out of the whole thing, the only encrypted thing is the message itself, right? And okay, so that's a good start, but not great, you know. And again, we kind of have to think about like, what is your risk profile? Like, who are you trying to defend yourself against, right? So you know, if it's against your prankster friend, you know, that's a different situation. Then you need like a better locking on your phone and you're good, right? Or you know, that's like a different risks. Yeah, but I don't see Nostr being used for, or being a good idea to be used for like a DM private communication.
Right. But it seems like maybe one of the places where it could be useful is in being this identity hub, which helps, or, well, I don't know if even Nostr or, you know, maybe there's a lot of talk of Web 5 and DIDs and other ways to do identity, but effectively the identities that get established with the public-private key pairs and the publishing on Nostr gives you some representation that this is the real Nout and this is the real DK. And then from that, you know, maybe we go off and use some other more, you know, privacy-specific design technology, not kind of a broadcast technology to do that. And in that world, are there, you know, I've played with lots of the tools, but I wouldn't claim to have a deeply informed opinion about the trade-offs of each or which ones are good. So I think, you know, things like Signal come to mind. I use Signal a lot, and I've heard some people have some concerns with it, or, you know, some people think it's kind of the solution. I wonder if you could give us a little overview. Like, is Signal a good thing, or does it have some trade-offs that you're uncomfortable with? And are there other things that you would suggest we look at?
Right. And so first I have to preface it, like, I'm not expert, right? So anyone listening, don't listen to me too much. I'm the user, I'm having the experience, but I use Signal, and I think it gets definitely multiple things right. There is a security issue, which is around centralization, right? That like all of your communications have to go through the centralized server. And even though encrypted, and even though we have proofs, at least as much as we can get, that like there is not much that the Signal servers can actually do, there is some level of risk where they would be able to get the keys to maybe decrypt your conversation, and because those are using like a native sub-chip in Intel processors, right? I don't remember exactly the full story, but there is this like you are using Intel IGS or something like that, and that has the issue. That said, it seems to be like a good balance, and it does a lot of things right by really being careful about not leaving around any metadata other than the last time you logged in, right? So, and you can see it, like the signal.org website publishes when they get requests from government, right? From 3-letter agencies, they get requests, and they always publish publicly like what they replied. And they were like, for this specific person, you guys are interested in this phone number. The only information we have is the last time they signed in. Sorry, we cannot do any more. We don't have any more, right? So, okay, so that's at least like a decent proof that there is value and it seems to be working. The issue, you know, the one part of the issue with Signal is that it requires a phone number, which is obviously allows to kind of trace you and understand. So you use it only in situations when it's like your friends that you would give the phone number to anyway. Right. You cannot like really use it with like a randos online for something.
Right.
So all of this is balanced. There is no perfect solution that I have seen. But yeah.
Right. Is there any kind of new projects in the works, or people, you know, like new theories or hypotheses you've heard that maybe fix some of the concerns around Signal, or is that kind of probably going to be the best we have for the next, I don't know, months and years, you think?
Yeah, probably for months to come. There has been rumors that they are going to remove the requirements for phone number. So that would be helpful thing. There are also ways that you can actually use Lightning to get yourself a phone number, which is that helps. And I've actually used
So you're saying use Lightning, meaning pay some provider via Lightning and not have it tied to any other phone number or physical address if you want to.
I'm blanking on the name of the service, but literally you go to a website and it's like, hey, pay 5,000 sats, you get phone number. And even on the website, so for example, it could be for like a message verification, but anyone can see it, right? But it will be like, on the website, you will immediately see the verification SMS, the short message that you get from the provider. You can just copy the code and boom, you use the verification using this phone number situation. And you pay with Lightning. So there are also ways how to get more anonymous SIM cards. Again, I would have to look through my memory document where I have like all of the links.
Right.
But yeah, there are ways.
What would be, are there current regulations that are limiting what you might consider things that you think should be more permissible, but which are not? Like, so I don't know the regulation at all, but I could imagine that, the telecommunications infrastructure is well regulated and maybe there's some almost, I don't know, is there something of like a KYC for phone numbers? And so if you're using Lightning to get a phone number, you're kind of playing in a gray area, or what is the state of the world? And what do you think is maybe, due for a re-examination, potential change?
Yeah, and this is interesting. And we seem to be getting out of the world of like requiring SIM cards, and some of them are electronic now, and they have, usually it goes in a way that they have even more tracking. It definitely changed over the years. And as far as I know, like, for example, in the US, you are no longer allowed to get a phone number or a card without your ID, right? There are still countries around the world, multiple in Europe I know about, that where you can actually go and, pay money. Here you go, little box with a SIM card you can use. So that's, the regulation has been definitely going in a space like, we track everyone and everything they do. So, yeah. And I guess some of definitely the electronic sort of services where you order your eSIM sort of online, they are in a gray area. And it's not clear, like, if they are always going to be there or if they are going to disappear in some jurisdictions, let's say.
Right. So when I think about...
Have you used any, like a kind of privacy technology like this? Have you tried anything like that?
Meaning using a SIM that's not my physical SIM? I've not used a SIM separate from my physical SIMs. So I haven't really studied that world well. I mean, I guess like maybe one analogy would be Proton Mail. So I think Proton Mail is kind of a similar concept, but not around mobile phones, but around email. So it's just some server you can pay. I think they run it out of Switzerland or somewhere.
Yeah.
Where you can just pay and get it, and they don't really ask you to tie it to some other, backup or SMS or other, kind of identity. So I think I played around with that stuff. Pretty familiar and comfortable with it. I think that's a good tool for freedom. But I was going to ask, broadly within this space, I generally like it because I like tools that empower people to push back and to have more of their own ability to sort of live their lives. But I don't really, I wouldn't say I'm very anchored in one political view or another. But I think a lot of people who hear about these concerns, would categorize it as something, I don't know if is it libertarian or maybe it's a Republican type view or something. I don't know if that's how people would characterize it, but I wonder if you could share some of how you might describe it to somebody who sees it as a very political thing and who doesn't see it more as a human right.
Well, that's what I would try to actually explain to them, that like, don't view it as a political thing. Like, it's every individual's right, and we need to fight for that, because otherwise we are going to end up really bad, right? Like, I think I said somewhere that like, I don't believe in heaven, but I believe in hell. And if we do things wrong, we can end up in hell. And so, yeah, I would try it, like explaining to the person, like, why is that? And to note, right? So let's say the U.S. political system, like you have kind of the left and you have the right, and they have been like so far from each other recently.
Yeah,
this is not how the questions are split in other countries, right? Like you have this strong left, strong right, and they have the opinions.
Right.
From where I'm from, it's actually like almost like a horizontal line, right? We have the things on top and the things on the bottom in some sense. Like it's that different. So if I see like the US people on the right, half of what they say totally makes sense. Half of what they say, totally crazy. Same on the left. And so that's kind of, the first thing is try to get yourself out of this model that you have to be part of one of those two groups, because that's not reality in the rest of the world anyway.
Yep. Are there certain flavors of the kinds of things that cause, like why does in the US the right and left exist? And what are the features that cause that type of split? Is it something maybe in the history or some cultural thing or sociological or the way media works? Or in what causes the horizontal line with the above and below to be a different split? Like what are the features? Is it like, fiscal lives above and social lives below, or there's a religious belief in a certain place that causes these to sort of all be gathered in this end of a spectrum or kind of in this area of a quadrant?
Honestly, it could be any of that. Like I thought about it, but I was unable to come up to like, where is this actually coming from? But there are big differences. And, part of that could be something with religion, although like, hard to say. Like, I don't know. I can tell you, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Is there a future you see where the spectrum gets reoriented, and what would be a driver of that reorientation?
I think, from the basic stuff that I know from history, or it seems to me that those positions have like switched, and they switched once in a couple of generations. And it may be just the nature of the problem that it's cyclic, right? That like you have the revolutionaries and they have the revolution, but then they do, and then what? Now they are the main one. And then you have the new people that do the revolution and they, defeat the base. And now they are the winning, right? The ruling class.
Yeah.
So, but.
So it's a little bit of like maybe a pendulum swing that, every generation wants something a little bit different than the one before. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's always like young kids have like, what are the young kids doing? And they are like, what are the old, people? Why are they preventing us from do the thing we want? And, so there is multiple sort of people in a disagreement, and yeah.
I was just hanging out with a friend yesterday who identifies as Gen X, from age perspective, and he was asking us a kind of an interesting question, which was like, if I say the term sellout, who comes to mind first? And then there was like some discussion around that, and I raised the point that I'd heard, I think I saw on Twitter or something, that in maybe a Gen Z, the concept of sellout doesn't even exist. The concept is like, get that bag. It's just what maybe Gen X would have called selling out. Gen Z celebrates as, just, scrape some money off the man. Right. So it's a very like a tick and a tock of a pendulum that really alternates views there. Could
be easily, right? But like the thing to note, only US sort of has this Gen X, Gen Z, like that, right? Like in other countries, it's not a meaningful separation. And, part of it may be that it depends, like when the country is industrialized in the 19th and 20th century, when did they move to cities? When did that happen, right?
Yep.
And so, it's interesting because like people in the US are like, hey, Gen X this and Gen Z that. Not generally applicable at all.
Right. Okay. So it's not as much a global phenomenon as maybe it seems to me, living in San Francisco, talking to other U.S.
to the world, right?
people. Sorry.
How is the cold, by the way? How is it has been
cold
freezing
here
recently, isn't it?
Oh, it's been crazy. Yeah. I don't know if you saw any of the pictures on Twitter, but some friends have been going up. Marin County is just north of the city here, and it's this kind of bucolic, usually very sunny and warm place. And and they actually have snow on the top of Mount Tam, and there's people. It's very little bit of snow, but it's enough that it's like worth. Everybody wants to go out and go crazy, and like, hey, there's at least a little bit of snow. Let's go. So people are dragging their skis up. Skis they would have for going to the mountains. They actually grab them, and coastal California doesn't really have a very skiable climate at all, much more Mediterranean. But people are dragging their skis up to Mount Tam to try to get a few inches of run in with their skis, trying to stay warm.
And I wonder, like, is this global warming finally making everything more interesting, or what is happening? I don't know.
Yeah. There was a topic that I wanted to raise. I think we had it on our list of things, but I don't want to speak out of turn in revealing something. But we were talking about Stacker News and Geyser were each topics, and I think you're a user at least, but maybe do you know the people, or you're more connected?
I know the folks, and I have helped both teams. Both as a user, both by putting some sats in.
Cool. So that's enough foundational for what I wanted to ask, because I think the type. So Stacker News, I'll just give like the overview, is it's basically a subreddit like experience where you have to use Satoshis, so you have to use Bitcoin to pay to post, to pay to upvote something, etc. And then Geyser is basically a crowdfunding platform based on Bitcoin, right? Is that a reasonable summary of each?
Yeah, very good.
Okay. And so, I'm passionate about like these kinds of tools that provide really good use cases for Bitcoin to be more useful in the world. Instead of just store of value, you can actually use it for payments and to transact in ways that really couldn't be done before. So that's kind of why I'm always leaning in and paying attention to that stuff. It feels very new and fresh, and it helps these freedom technologies get more broadly adopted. But the kind of question I've been asking myself, and I'd like to hear your opinion since you're sort of close to some of the technologies and the people, is if before Nostr existed, I think there were it's kind of a landscape of trade-offs that people would make when building these tools that are not really, the tools themselves are not designed to be decentralized. The tools are more like willing to take the centralized compromise in order to make the decentralized money work better. And now with the emergence of Nostr, it almost seems like there's an opportunity for the tools themselves to be decentralized. And so I wonder, like, between those two, maybe Stacker News and Geyser, and maybe there's even other ones you have in mind, but what's your best sort of advice or thinking when talking to those teams? Do you think that these should all become clients of Nostr, or is there some reason to slow down and stay the course? And sort of, just what's your thinking around the general space of people building on Bitcoin or building on Lightning?
Yeah, and I think Nostr brings a lot of advantages, right? Like, as you said, we have sort of finally a good decentralized ID space for people to have like their ID. And it makes sense to connect it with tools like this, right? I like that. That said, like, both would have to be careful in kind of moving through this space. It definitely, the big opportunity for both Stacker News and Geyser that I see is in the fact that they can work fully globally, right? Mm-hmm. That is because they carry, on top of the Bitcoin network, which is fully global money. Anyone from any place in the world can donate to someone else in a second, right? Without anything. At the same time, in both cases, their centralized nature makes it a little risky, right? Like, that is obviously, if someone wants to put a pressure, that's where they would put the pressure. Right. And so the Nostr may be a good solution for the ability to not put a pressure on the team. And we'll see how that works out. Like, my recommendation would be like, let's explore it. Let's try your best. Let's do all sorts of things, but also be careful, right? Because like, you have to think about what is the core of the value that you are providing, and what is the experience that you want the users to have, and what are the things you need to do to make your platform or tool secure. Yeah, it's a little open, and I'm excited about both. I'm excited I know that they have been looking into Nostr, and I'm excited about where is that gonna go. And I know, I know from Stacker News, Kian, he's been definitely from the beginning, from our conversations in the very beginning, he's been like, I want to figure this out, how to have it decentralized eventually.
Yep.
And that made me excited. That made me excited for sure. And similarly with Geyser folks, right? They had like, hey, this is the part of the thing that needs to be open sourced. This is how we take advantage of the existing open source technologies to just be the connecting point. We are no longer even serving like the money transfer, right? It's just us connecting the dots between the people. And that kind of gives them the wiggle room to, have some safety. Yeah, both exciting. I'm really happy with the teams.
Are there? I know that in Stacker News, I've followed Stacker News probably a little bit closer than Geyser. So I know that Kian has been experimenting. Did you see Booger, the relay project that he just launched? So did
he do something with it, or is it just a relay, or does it do something?
Well, it's a relay. I think it's kind of meant to be a simple relay. The kind of idea is not to build the best relay right now. The idea is to help Kian get experience kind of tearing it down from scratch, like building up what are the basics of what a relay is and how do you make the simplest relay that, I think Kian's so humble. He's like, even I can understand, kind of what's going on here. So he wants to start it kind of from scratch. And then I suspect as he learned, he'll figure out which direction he wants to take it, if he wants to pursue it, and sort of how it fits into Stacker News. So I think that's like a positive movement. I think he also may have said something about Stacker News becoming a Nostr client, if I recall. I think that was said this past week on Stacker News. And then, but I don't know sort of the Geyser team. Are they exploring building relays? Are they playing with existing relays? Are they exploring making Geyser a Nostr client, or what would that look like?
So I've definitely seen them exploring Nostr, as in like using it. And they have been really good on getting, using the recent Lightning technologies and the recent specs and ideas and projects really well, right? They have been doing it really well. So they have this full Lightning address integration. You can connect your node. They have a good onboarding experience that almost lets you connect the node immediately. So I'm excited about that. I don't know if they are actually doing, how would that work? Right? That's a good question. I guess Nostr does well with sort of having the communication layer, right? It's like a good base protocol for communicating and sending things around. In Geyser, that's definitely desirable for community where, Geyser is this fundraising sort of platform where people create campaigns and other people can invest, right? Over using Satoshis. And so I think one key aspect of that is building community around the campaign or the effort or the project, right? Yep. And that involves let's get the folks excited. Let's have a direct communication, and the lead is gonna be replying you as soon as you support with a couple of sets. You get direct access. You can chat with the person, stuff like that, right? And kind of creating the community. And so that's where maybe Nostr could be used, right? That kind of would make sense. And especially as Nostr becomes easier to, kind of for normies, let's say, to use in applications, that could be a really nice way. Yeah.
Right. Are there features of, say, broadly crowdfunding that, wouldn't work on Nostr? So I'm thinking about, if there's customer service, probably Nostr is not going to do a good job at customer service. It's just a protocol, right? So that seems like the kind of thing that could be more of the function of a centralized company and a centralized provider providing it. But setting up a campaign seems like something that, we don't have it yet today, but you could imagine a Nout itself as a campaign. And you could imagine whether it's, protocol innovation or new client innovation, but you could imagine sort of the whole experience of creating a campaign, setting the numbers, all those replies, all the fundraising happening in a, over kind of this messaging protocol. Yep. And so I wonder, sort of, if you pick apart the pieces, what are the things that that Geyser will focus on in a Nostr world, and what are the things that Geyser will sort of outsource to Nostr in that world? And I always think about things like, customer service, or maybe there's market making, if there's some sort of trust layer needed to ensure that the campaign is legit, or some sort of reputation that's not otherwise expressible in the messaging protocol. Maybe that kind of thing should live as part of a centralized provider, but I don't know if you have any other
I'm
other
thinking
categories
like
of
around
things.
the identity of people. Like if you sort of need some like basic layer of verification, like verifying that someone has a Nostr account, and maybe they are in one of the relays that you prefer or something like that. That may be interesting. Across all of the projects, what's the one thing that seems to be missing currently with Nostr? Or at least I haven't seen that you need like a single really good node, and there's a lot of functionality around that node, and then all of the Nostr features, like a community around it, right? And I have seen some group chats. Maybe that's part of it. You can comment on a single node. Maybe that's part of that. But having like a rich sort of base application that's well defined and known, and then people interact and create like a threads around it and conversations around it, that seems to be kind of missing. And what you said, right, like with the business front or something like that. So I actually see that there's a big opportunity. When you travel around like Central and South America, around Latin America, most of the businesses are on WhatsApp. What does that mean, right? Like to someone in US, that's like, what do you mean? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Literally you will have ad and like, hey, we fix your garden WhatsApp number. Hey, we can get or even you go to a hotel, and hotel has a WhatsApp number. Hey, do you want a room service? You text on WhatsApp, and they even have automation, right? So you like open their number, and it already has like a business like, hey, select one of the options. What would you like? Would you like a room service? Would you like this and that? And so they have like a clear business front, right? And that's something that could be replicable using the Nostr technologies. And I'm just waiting for someone to figure it out.
Yeah, so kind of business customer service via business, but via maybe like there's a QR code or something that connects to a NPub or something that lets me contact the business, and then the whole suite of tools.
Right? We need the basic, like we need the campaign or the business front ID or something like that, right? Like there needs to be like the entity, and then you can have surrounding interactions using Nostr. Like that technology, that platform then works really well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does seem like that would be, a case where, somebody needs to build that for businesses, and they need to contact businesses and help them use it, and probably have customer service or support line. So that does seem like the kinds of things that a centralized provider would do a good job at. I guess we would see more of that once we have more maybe messaging use cases or just general normies, let's say, if you want to call it, where it just becomes more common. Everybody who shows up at this hotel already has a Nostr client, already has a Nostr ID, and so it makes sense to actually order room service with this. But maybe my guess is that's further than just a few months away. That's maybe at least maybe a year or more.
Probably, and maybe and the situation is right that people have the WhatsApp, and so maybe, and I haven't really thought it through, but like, is there a way to like use your WhatsApp account and then be on Nostr like kind of immediately? Is there like some integration that like, oh, by default in Nostr we generate NPub for you from your phone number, and that's your WhatsApp association, or right? Like, is there maybe some like trick or technology like that? I don't know.
Do you think that any of the existing large-scale centralized providers will make kind of proactive moves to try to support this, or do you think they'll just never make, maybe it's not a good business decision, or it'll be too conflicted of a decision to make to actually make that kind of change?
Yeah, I don't see a future where they would do that. Like, I don't think, I think in those big businesses, like all of those people are at least like 5 years behind what we are talking about now, right? Like no one even considered the things we were talking about 5 years ago. And we have like developed all of this story after that. So I don't see that, right? Like they'll push like there's centralized application and it solves this, and it's like good with regulation in different countries, and yeah.
Do you think there will be some adaptation the other way? So like one example, actually I meant to write a bounty for this, but I would like it if I could, let's say I had a goal to be able to do all of the consumption that I do on Twitter today via Nostr. And let's also go with the hypothesis that Twitter is not going to become a Nostr client in the next, few weeks. Okay. Probably months, if ever. But for now, like, let's say we start with that. I could imagine somebody could build a service that would let me show all of the people that I want to follow and pull all of those tweets and publish them for me as a Nostr note. And I can consume that way. I can't reply to them. I can't interact with them. So maybe it needs some other UI feature to tell me, oh, this is only on Twitter. It's not here. But at least it helps me sort of consume in the way that I want, or have like an extra tab where I can, read Twitter without interacting with Twitter. And I wonder, like, do you think that some of those kinds of, have you seen examples where those kinds of things are already being proposed, or kind of like hack projects or stuff like that? Because that's one that I think I might write a bounty on. It would be fun to be able to have such a tool.
What is useful is trying to get to the bottom of like, what would you like, right? Like, what is the thing that you are trying to fix? Is it that you have like a community of people on Twitter and you are missing them on Nostr, and you want to have like a reference to them? Or what is the thing that you actually want? What do you need?
Yeah, so I like to read information from a bunch of different sources. Mm-hmm. And some of those sources, it used to be that almost all of the sources that I wanted to read from were on Twitter. And so I could just open Twitter and I could have the experience I want. And now I'd say like there's plenty of those sources still only publish on Twitter, but some of those sources only publish on Nostr. And so now I'm busy all day. Okay, open Twitter, do a little bit there, open Nostr, read a little bit there, open Twitter, and I'm sort of back and forth. So kind of what I want is a unified experience for all of the stuff from everywhere I would want to look. And I guess like in the long run, I want a lot of configurability and switches, like, oh, if I ever care to open Instagram, I'd also want to have an ability to pull those photos into that same place. But I don't want 5 apps or 10 apps or dozens of places that I have to go. I'd like to have one place I can go that I can configure to give me the different UIs and kind of an expressive UI for the kind of consumption that I'm in the mood for right now, or for the kind of consumption that I am open to discovery.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? And I'm afraid that that's only possible with open networks. And I don't think, and I'm even afraid of like trying to do this with some of the closed networks like Twitter. And so I even wrote a post on Nostr about trying to people discourage from doing exactly what you explained.
Oh, okay.
Saying, and so the reasoning is following. You are essentially, kind of bringing the worst from both sides when you do that, right? And my case was like, hey, so what if we just kind of clone the posts from someone and they have like a Nostr generated account and it has all the posts and you can follow them, right? But it comes with multiple issues, right? Because Twitter has specific interactions, like you can like things, you can quote, or you can like reference people, right? At sign, and you add someone, you can reply to people. And if you try transferring that to Nostr, it stops working, right? So imagine like someone is writing a tweet and it references multiple people, right? They have like ABC. In Nostr, we don't have those references. We have to like rewrite it to Twitter or do something like that. And so it breaks your experience when you use it on Nostr. Because now you're like, oh, I'm going to Twitter. Why am I doing that, right? And you see it. So that's one option. Another issue is the people that posted it, like the point of Twitter is you can interact with them, right? They sit on Twitter, you see the post, and you can interact with them, and they see it, they like it, they reply to you, right? They have this interaction. You break that by being on Nostr, right? Because you see someone post, I'm like, oh, that's triggering, I want to reply. Oh, I cannot, what do I do now, right? And that makes it that makes it worse. And finally, this actually makes it worse even for the people on Nostr. Like as soon as you start sort of reposting and like liking someone posts that, or boosting them or whatever on Nostr, other people will see it and they'll be like, oh, cool, someone posted this thing. Let me see. Oh, they are dead Nostr account.
Right. Yep. It's like a shadow account or something.
Like a shadow account. And last point, and this is for the people that would set up like an automatic sort of reposting, right? Because you may want to be like, hey, I want to write the thing once, and I want to post it on both, right? But the issue is that also breaks the experience of the people that follow you, right? So what happens often in that case, like you write the thing once, it posts it both on Twitter and on Nostr, but at some point you get bored and you stop like using the Nostr platform, right? So your things still get posted there, and you have like people replying there and like trying to be like asking you questions, but you never come back, right? You never see those, you never get back to it. And that kind of breaks that experience for those people. right? And so, given all of this, I'm suggesting to people, be careful. Like, don't do this cloning of information. Enjoy the fact that we have separate communities. Like, have fun with it. You know, do both. You at least have like a separation, right? You can be like, oh, I have this type of people here and this type of people here.
Right. Yeah.
It's okay. And why I'm saying all of this, right? So in past, I have been using Mastodon. And this is exactly the effect that was happening on Mastodon. So people created like automated syncing things, automating reposters from Twitter, right? And you would end up with like a full wall of posts on Mastodon from people that are not on Mastodon, right? And you're like, oh, cool reply. Let me, message you, and like zero response, right? Why is that? Because the person hasn't been there for a year, but you see still every day their post. So that's my argument against that.
Okay, I mean, I understand those problems, and so I don't feel so strongly
at the same time, I hear you, right? Like, you want this centralized view of what's happening, and you want to be able to control it and mix and match. I think there's use case there.
And I think I'm imagining a future where any message on the internet that I have access to, I can configure how I see it. Right. So my view is like, look, maybe instead of just trusting that Apple is going to send me whichever push notice the OS decides is okay, or saying that maybe Slack is on or WhatsApp is off, I can just have like, here's every message that I have access to, whether it came from a Slack-like experience or a WhatsApp experience, or maybe we should wait until all of these experiences get rebuilt as Nostr clients. Like, I think you're kind of advocating that. Like, I think it's reasonably a credible direction. I'm not suggesting like it's obviously wrong, but I could also see a version where I say like, look, the world is not all going to be on Nostr tomorrow. It's going to take a long time before everybody figures it out. It's a new mechanism, a new modality, all kinds of new contours of things that you have to really get through and learn. And so it's not going to happen overnight. So instead, can I at least see the future by kind of creating the experience, knowing the flaws, but creating the experience that I think kind of a fully interoperable messaging service that has fully configurable UI and UX, that I can flip the switches and make it do the thing I want, how I want. And I can even have a little note that says, hey, this one came from Twitter, so you have to click through and interact with them on Twitter if you want to interact with this tweet. This is not a Nostr node, this is a tweet, but it's been repurposed. And so there's a UI that helps me do that. But basically, in a sense, it's almost like a messaging OS is a Nostr client that's a messaging OS. And it just has like a Twitter, like, actually showing me the tweets, but then actually showing me the notes, and then showing me my Slack messages and my DMs and my, I sort of like, I kind of want to see what that looks like and feels like. So that's like this idea of the repurpose. Every single concern you expressed, I 100% agree with. I just also wonder, like, is there what does it feel like to have those experiences? And like, because I think in the future we will have something like that, but it may take quite a long time before we get it. So I just always like to, play with that, even if it's hacky and breaks in all the ways that you mentioned. Not meant to be maybe like a mass market consumer product, but an early look at what the future may look like. That's kind of my
and I like that, right? And I'm interested in how that works out. But just to be devil's advocate, right? And I hear you, and I think I have a similar sort of wish. I wish I would have like this experience. But to be a devil's advocate there, right? Are you sure that you really want all of those thousands of different feeds of information to be thrown at you in a single box, in a single experience? Or would you rather have those be compartmentalized, I cannot spell that, into different experiences, and you have like a dedicated spot? One of those you open in a kitchen, the other one when you're sitting on in a restroom. Right? Like, is there like a separation that you would like to have between those experiences, or do you really want to have those in the same box?
Yeah, I mean, I think they all live on Mac OS today. So True. That's the size of my box. That's the scope of my box. But within that, I don't really have the choice of like, can I take my Slack DMs and route them through a messaging client, but the Slack channels keep them in the Slack app? Like, that customizability isn't possible today, but they all live within the OS. So I guess what I'm proposing is I want like a messaging OS where I can at least do these things. Because I think if you go far forward in the future, like the future has this thing, right? I don't think I can be convinced that the future doesn't have that. But I don't know if it's 2 years out, 10 years out, even more. I don't know. But I want to see what that looks like and feels like. And so today I accept it as is. But I think more flexibility, more user choice. And it's not to say that everybody wants to, if there's thousands of settings and now basically everybody's going to accept the defaults. But I think what's interesting is you could have a different set of defaults. And I could be like, you know what? I don't really want to configure them, but I know that Nout has already done a great job and I trust he set it up. So I just want to like take the template of his crazy settings that he's done. I just want to like import the settings and then I get the Nout experience. Then I can like refine from there. Oh, I like Slack, but not Discord or something, right? So I can sort of tweak. But like this was, I was talking to, I don't know if you saw the video I made with David Nachum. He was on the Gmail team at Google, and he was telling me about how it's almost like the settings page of Gmail was like where every product manager's pet project would live. And so it had like this crazy settings page with all these little niche features and use cases. And, very few things actually graduated up to be proper tier 1 Gmail features. But I think there's something actually instructive about that for Nostr, which is like a big tech company builds for 1 billion people. And you sort of have to pick the lowest common denominator that's palatable, understandable, acceptable, and useful and clear to 1 billion people or so. Yep. And I think with something like the Gmail settings screen, they were trying to say, okay, this is maybe only 100,000 people in the world will care about the setting, but they care so deeply that we'll put the setting in and then they'll use it. They'll love it. It'll just be like a much, much better email experience. And like a settings page on Gmail is sort of buried in the weeds. Mostly nobody knows it. But if you could say, oh, here's a client, it was built for people who maybe have a hard of vision. They need a different vision setting because they have like some sort of partial blindness. And they also read right to left languages. And so they need like special set of features that really work for that. And big tech company serving 1 billion people probably doesn't really care about that use case. But the Gmail settings page is like the first kind of peek we get at what it would look like if you could configure Gmail for thousands of different cases, many of which are just not discoverable today. But that's what inspires me about Nostr is we can actually try these and they can have first class clients. They could have their own settings pages that get merged in. There could be like a labs and a playground area where I could like, let me take Damus, but then have, Damus with the DK setting that has it exactly how I want. That's sort of like the future. I just think there's gonna be so much, just an insane amount of innovation at the UI layer that we've just never had because it just doesn't fit within the priorities of a centralized provider.
I like that. And I like that this is shifting to the point where the user can like do their own sort of defensive in a way, but like build their experience on their own and not dictated by a single application. That's the power. And like, have you seen, by the way, I shared with you the article about designing for emergence.
Yes, I did. Yeah, that's cool.
Have you seen it? Have you read it?
I had only seen it when you shared it, but yeah.
I think that's exactly the big point of Nostr, right? And, I'm probably not going to explain it well, but like the main argument in the article is that like, often the companies will be designing for the big majority case, right? Like you have 500 million people have this thing and have this need.
Yep.
And you need to give them a single nice Gmail type of UI. What the article is arguing, well, okay, but then there is this like a tail of use cases that are crazy, and maybe like one person has that use case in the world, right? And so should that company build for them, right? And what it was kind of getting to is there is a way how to design for that, right? For that tail of experiences. And you sort of need to shift more into something like we are seeing with Nostr, into almost like a protocol or a tool level thing, right? That like, you just hook those two together and like, you do the thing you want. Boom, done, right? And all of them are nicely pluggable, right? And so that's why I'm excited about Nostr, because it's covering exactly this long tail of needs. And like I want a pink view. Like, okay, you get a pink view. I want a picture of a cat for every post I post. You get it, right?
Yeah. It's great. Well, that's an inspiring future. So I'll link the emergence blog post that you mentioned in the in the YouTube description, so people can explore the blog post. I know that we're a little bit over time already, and we've got so many more topics we could talk about. So I'll just have to leave it with a thank you and suggest that we do this again sometime soon, so we can cover more of these topics. Because I had a great time talking to you and learning from you about kind of all of your privacy ideas and sort of your ideas about being a NIM online. I've never talked to anybody who has really exercised it the way you have. So I really appreciate you coming to share that. But man, we could go on all day. So I think we have to call it a pause on this one.
Thank you so much. This was really fun for me, and we should meet for beer sometimes, and we'll figure it out. Yeah, sounds good.
Let's do it. That'll be fun. Okay, we'll see you.
All right.